Order. And before I start, I'll read our standard statement. As chair of the Exeter Police Stakeholders Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. On February 17th, 2021, public notice of this meeting was posted on the town website and on the bulletin board of the town offices at 10 Front Street. As provided in that public notice, the public may access the meeting online and via phone. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you and who that person is, which is required under the right to know law. So I'll start. I don't think, as I said earlier, Elliot Berkowitz and Tanisha Johnson both said they would not be able to make it today, and Molly Cowan has let us know that likely Alexis Simpson will not be here as well. But if she can join us later, she certainly will. Matt Carboni.
Present. I'm by myself, but my wife is in the building.
Very good. Katie Adams.
Present. I'm alone in the room.
Great. Emily Heath.
I'm here and I'm alone in the room.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hi,
Darius.
Present and accounted for by myself in the barn.
Okay. And Molly Cowan, I see you.
Hey, everybody, here alone in the room.
And Daryl Brown.
I am present alone downtown in a business.
Very good. Okay. And I didn't hear from Harry, so he may just join late. I had been emailing with him earlier, so I expect him to be here. Or he didn't say that he wouldn't be here. So he may also join us a little bit later. So we officially bring the meeting to order. And real quickly, well, first we can approve the old minutes. Actually, let me just see. They were pretty extensive, so has everyone had a chance to read the minutes? And does anyone have any edits or corrections, comments, etc., before we vote on them? I don't see anybody with any issues. Okay, I'd look for a motion then to approve the minutes as written.
Motion to approve the minutes as written.
And do I have a...
I second it.
Okay. Motion by Darius Thompson, second by Matt Carboni. And I will call the roll. And we may or may not have a quorum now that I see it, but let's give it a go. Matt.
Aye.
Katie.
Aye.
Emily Heath.
Aye.
Darius Thompson.
Aye.
And the chair says aye. But I'm not sure if we actually do have it. Okay. So minutes are approved as written. The other quick old business I wanted to mention was in terms of the survey, we are up to about 333 responses. I got that from Bob Glowacki today, which is pretty exciting. It really spiked, I think, from like the 100 to 300 pretty quickly, kind of leveling off at about the 333 right now. I think we've got a final push into the end of February. I know I haven't done this yet, but I will do this tomorrow, is get the poster up into the town clerk's office, which I got permission to do that. I just hadn't done it yet. And if there's any other areas you folks can think of, I know you've been great. Everyone, we've really reached out. A lot of folks I ended up talking to. I talked to the president of the chamber, and she had already heard from you, Emily, through another area, which was great, Rotary, I believe. So she then got it out to the rest of the chamber, and I know that it's all over the place. So this is great. I mean, I was hoping for about 500, but I think we're doing really well. And I'm going to be excited to hear what we get for responses on that. So that's a quick update on that. Did anyone have any comments about the survey while I'm chatting about that?
I have a quick question. We had PA President Bill Rawson on last night on the select board, and I'm just wondering, has he heard? I know that Matt Carbone, you were asking for somebody else to do the outreach to him, but I'm wondering if we've sent that over for the PEA kids, and then also if anybody's connected with David Ryan.
Yeah, I did email David Ryan, and he did include it in his last big superintendent bulletin. And I also emailed the Exonian to see if, just go directly to the kids and see if they were interested in spreading it. But that was just recently, so I don't know if they have yet.
Yeah, I know they're just back at school.
All right. And Matt,
So I bumped it up my chain of command. Both bosses above me had it. They put it out to, I know they definitely put it out to people in my shop. There's probably about maybe 25 or 30. And I'm not sure if he bounced it up to the deans or the principal. I'm not in all the email links that go through campus, but I know Alexis was going to work
right.
it from the other direction. So
Right.
it's possible that it's there. It's just that I haven't seen it other than through my own supervisors.
Right. And to the general question, that was Alexis was going to jump on the academy to begin with. And I certainly have no problem reaching out to the principal as well. I didn't want to be duplicating effort, but I'm happy to do it. But I thought that was Alexis's purview, so I didn't want to step on her toes. But again, there's really no downside to
I know
kind
it's
of coming
there.
at it from various directions, right?
I know.
I will verify if he's been. Go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry.
I know it's over there, and as like Molly said, the kids just got back. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the priority right there is to, they're in massive testing, and they've got kids that are in quarantine, and there's all sorts of other priorities going on over there right now, just running the school. So, I think the right people have it. It's just their focus is on running the school right now.
We need the survey to be on like TikTok.
Right.
I don't know how to make that happen.
You can put it on TikTok if you want.
Yeah. I don't know how to do that either. If anyone wants to.
But I mean, I got into some facilities folks over there, people that work on campus. The kids that are there, they're really in a bubble. I mean, Katie will let you know, they're focused on going to school while they're there. And the only time they're going to see any type of police presence is if something went wrong and the dean's office is involved, and it's usually not necessarily a pleasant thing. But everybody over there is really focusing on getting back to school and getting through the school year. But not to say that the survey is not important to some people over there, but I understand what their priority is right now.
Fair enough. Any other comments in regard to the survey? Chief. I'm sorry. I didn't see you. There you go. Yep.
Sure. In perusing the comments, I'm really impressed at how much thought people are putting into these surveys. And I think we're going to be really, the information is going to help us out a lot. So another thing the board should start thinking about is how you're going to respond to those that want to be contacted. A quick estimate looked like about a third of them left their contact info and wanted to be contacted. So that's about 100 right now. So start thinking about how you're going to divvy that up and reach back out to them. That's all I have for that.
That's a really good point. That's an excellent point. In a good way, we have to be careful what we wish for, because we need to be ready to be responsive, because once we close this up, the worst thing that can happen is that we just kind of not follow up. So we should think about how we want to divvy that up. And it can just be, I would say, we'll do it by just the numbers. It doesn't necessarily matter who does what, as long as we make sure we get back to folks. Once we determine what the questions are, there may be, several people may ask the same type of thing. So maybe we can kind of compile it down and boil it down to where if you have 100 different people that ask the same question or interested in the same thing, then we can come up with a uniform response to those questions or those comments, et cetera. So that'll be some work for us. So I think good work though. So let's look forward to that, because our goal was to have the survey out until March 5th. In the back of my mind, I thought maybe we could keep it out there till the election day, but I'm not sure if that would make that much difference based on how elections are done now, if we would get that many more people. But I'm happy to do it. That was the only other thing I was going to throw out to the committee, is if they wanted it to stay open till March 9th, that Tuesday, that once again, I could get something over in the Talbot gym. We could have the QR code there, that kind of thing. If people don't think that's going to make a difference, we don't have to, but it was only a few days. So I thought I would throw that out to the committee. Also, we can talk about this at the end of the meeting. March 9th is actually our next meeting. And think about that between now and the end of the meeting, if in fact we want to meet that day. I actually thought you might not want to meet that day, just based on the fact that folks might be very busy, particularly the select board reps. But in addition to that, it's a busy day. So think about that between now and the end of the meeting, and we'll decide on that. Matt?
Just so everybody's aware, I've got a prior commitment on March 9th, and I'm not going to be here for the meeting. So
Okay, well, good to know. Might be another good reason not to do it. Okay, all right, very good. That's a great great input from everyone on the survey. I'm pretty excited about that. Which brings us to our goal number 2, our next item, item 4 for our discussion action items. Goal number 2, recruitment. And Chief Poulin was going to introduce the PERF workforce crisis. All I'd say to open this up is I hope folks got a chance. I know it was a lot of wording, a lot of pages, but I read a good bit of it, and it was really very eye-opening, I thought, and very interesting and well put together. So I'm looking forward to hearing from the chief and Lieutenant Bolduc and others. So I'll turn it over to you, Chief.
Okay, thank you. So I sent out the PERF workforce crisis research paper just so that you can get kind of an insight as to where the crisis is in policing right now. That was 2019, so obviously things have even changed since then. But this is still nothing new since 19. This has been going on since I found some research back to 2014 when they first started seeing, a real decline in how many applicants were putting in for this job. And to kind of give you a sense of how the job's changed, I think Mr. Carboni can attest to this. I know Elliot could have. But when I started 22 years ago, it was very competitive. This field was very competitive to try to get in. And you were up against, for Exeter, you'd be up against 50, 60 people that want one job. In other places, you could be up over 100 people that want one job. So there were waiting lists. There were things like that, very competitive. Now what we're seeing is a whole lot of vacancies and maybe a small handful of qualified applicants. And it's really the applicant's choice on where they want to work. And they can really do their homework and figure out who pays the most, maybe who has the most, different kind of specialized services they want to do, and things like that. Lieutenant Bolduc will speak more about our actual recruiting process, but I just want to give you a little taste on what that looks like right now with our applicant pool, the less and less interest of people wanting to do this job. You think about how the job has changed over the years and how we've become more social worker type with dealing with homelessness, mental illness, as we discussed at our last meeting, drug addiction issues. So we saw a whole larger gambit of responsibilities put on policing, more than just enforcing the laws. So we're seeing a shift in maybe seeing that turn again in another direction with reform and things like that. But for now, this is what the officers are faced with. And to do all those different jobs, and then for an Exeter salary of $47,000 a year, again, you can see why would someone want to do all those things, put themselves up to increased scrutiny, lawsuits, all different types of things for $47,000 a year. You're probably not going to live in this community for $47,000 a year. So just think real hard about those things. Where we are with that $47,000, we're average with the rest of the state. A quick look today on Indeed for New Hampshire police jobs. Quick search of the area. There's at least 8 police officer openings, and the average for those 8 is $44,000 a year. So we're good as far as the pay goes. We're right in that average. Is it good overall? No. For what they do and what they put themselves in danger and face every day, I think all of you would say that sounds really low. Where we're missing the bar is on dispatchers. Quick search on Indeed for dispatchers. There were 4 openings, one immediately next door to us. And we are low. The average for dispatch hiring is $19.25, and Exeter hires at $18.11. So we're down by over $1. And what makes Exeter unique with dispatching is we don't just dispatch police. They dispatch fire and police. So not only do they have a lower starting wage, but they have a lot more responsibilities, and the job is a lot more difficult. So, when the supervisor discusses, hiring a dispatch, that's going to be a factor there. You have other people hiring dispatch, might just be police dispatch, and they can make more money. So those are obviously the money issues or contract items. We'll deal with those, when we can. Police contracts actually coming up at the end of 21. We just had an extension on that, and the dispatchers are included in that contract. So maybe, that'll be up for discussion when we start talking about recruitment retention. Right now we hire at 21 years old. I made sure when I was appointed that I would make sure 21 years old was the minimum. In New Hampshire, you can be 18. Thinking back when I went to the academy, there was actually someone in that academy that was 19 years old. So what you're seeing, again, issues across the country, you're seeing some decisions being made that maybe maturity plays into that, maybe life experiences plays into some of these poor decisions. So, we want to make sure it's at least 21. We try to get people with at least a bachelor's degree or a combination of age and education. Not to say if you don't have a degree, we're not going to look at you. We look at everybody independently. We'll look at their strengths, and it starts at an oral board, and then we go from there. You see, some of you may know in California, there's a bill, and some of these states have these coming up too, where California is actually has a bill to increase the age of a police officer to 25 years old or have a bachelor's degree at a minimum. So they've recognized, and California is kind of, like everything else, they're kind of ahead of everyone, right? And then slowly things come to the East Coast, but they're already thinking ahead and saying, even 21, 22 is a little young to be a police officer and be faced with some of these pivotal decisions that they have to make. But we look at, their past experiences, their history. The best indicator of future performance is past performance, right? So when we do a background, we do a deep dive into all those things. One of the Lee Act recommendations, I know I sent out the Lee Act link so that you could all be familiar with that. A lot of information in there. They're doing a lot of good work. It comes down to really one of the things is really during a background investigation, vet those recruits out, go into their social media footprints, really look for any kind of, maybe there's a bias in there, any kind of racist comments, any kind of derogatory information towards people of any kind. And really that's always been our philosophy, but not everybody does what they're supposed to do, right? But we do, and also as a Lee Act recommendation, we see that obviously that's coming out and people see the importance in having to do that. So that's just one of the many things we look into when we hire somebody. And then even after we hire somebody, that doesn't guarantee them that they're gonna be a good fit, or maybe the job turns out to be something they didn't think it was going to be. So we are okay with having invested some time and money in someone, but if at the end of the 8 months, 9 months, even a year, if that person's not the right fit for the job, or maybe says, hey, this really isn't for me, it's okay. We'll let them go. And that's for their benefit. That's for the town's benefit. That's for your benefit. It's just, we're not just, and back in the day, and maybe Mr. Carboni has seen this in his experience too, some agencies will keep people because, you know what, we spent a lot of money on this guy or this woman, and we're stuck with them, or we're going to make it work. But, we can't do that these days. So, I threw a lot of things at you, so I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Bolduc. He'll get more into the actual process, and then Supervisor Shoup will talk about their process a little bit, which we've also, revised. And then we could take questions. We'll look for input. One of the major things is creating a more diverse workforce and making your workforce or assuring your workforce reflects the community you police. That's a big one, right? So those are discussions we need to have. We'll talk about what our applicant pool currently exists, how we get those people, but how can we branch out? How can we reach out to different areas, perhaps, that we haven't thought of, that perhaps you folks can help us branch out to those.
Very good, Chief. It looks like Alexis has joined us. Hi, Alexis. So just for Matt's benefit, in case you didn't see that, Matt's been taking the notes for us. So thanks very much. Yeah, Chief, that's a lot. Everyone, as everyone's talking, my only recommendation would be for people to jot down their questions as whether it's the Chief or Lieutenant Bolduc speaking. So then when we get to the point where we have questions, you won't forget, because he covered a lot of ground right there, and we're just getting started. So thank you so much. And I think you want to turn it over to Lieutenant Bolduc. Was that right?
Hey, good afternoon. So we typically we're advertising the open positions on Indeed and through the town website. Through those advertisements, we're constantly getting resumes. From last November, we've received 24 resumes. Flipping through them quickly, we're looking at potentially 13 of those people are qualified, meaning some sort of military experience or college education, or even a life experience that we looked at can possibly transfer over to law enforcement. In those 13 qualified are essentially within driving distance to Exeter. We did have an additional qualified person, but they were out of state. And then 9 kind of unqualified that are somewhat local, and 1 that was out of state that was unqualified. Now, we respond to all those resumes. Anybody that sends in, tell them that we are building an eligibility list, and that I will getting back to them when we start the next phase of the hiring process. Another way that we pull in applicants is Great Bay Community College has a police testing alliance. It used to be in person. Back when the chief and I essentially took these tests, we would go in on a Saturday morning and spend 2 hours taking this test, and it would be a group of somewhere around 400 people taking this test. It's now online due to COVID, and they do it every quarter. And right now in the fall, they did their last one, and they had 103 people take the test. Of those 103, only 65 passed the test. We would typically take the top 20% of who passed the test and send them out invitations as well to either an oral interview or a physical fitness test. From the Police Testing Alliance, 67 towns are a part of that. So 67 towns will get the information on who passed that test. So 65 people passed the last test. 67 towns are requesting that. So it really boils down to less than 1 officer per town if they're all hiring. After the Police Testing Alliance, we get the resumes. We try and figure out the next step. And in the past, it would be an interview, and they would come in and sit for an oral board. We've switched that up a little bit to do an open physical fitness test. They can pass the oral board all they want, but the police academy will not accept them if they can't pass the physical requirements. So a part of that is, instead of us utilizing a lot of time on giving 30 people interviews, we would do the fitness test first. We can do that in the morning through a few hours. And then those that pass the fitness test, we can have them call in and sign up for the interview/oral board for a later date. So that's what we're doing. Of those resumes from November, we have set up our next fitness test, which is March 28th at 8 a.m. at Phillips Exeter Academy. Along with that, we've reached out to the Criminal Justice Department at UNH, and they have sent it out to all their graduate and undergraduate students advertising the fitness test. We won't turn anybody away from taking the fitness test. We don't necessarily need to have their resumes at that point. And if they pass the fitness test, we will give them an oral interview. We also have emails out to Salem State, Plymouth State, Keene State, and St. Anselm's. We have not gotten a response back whether they're going to send that out to their students or not, but we're hoping so. Once they get done with the fitness test, and that's pretty much one of the only portions they can control because they can work at passing this test. They do pass it. Like I said, they'll call in for an oral interview. We set up the oral board, and we have essentially 2 pages of questions that we go through each person. And it's more of a conversation nowadays than in the past. Through those questions, we're trying to get a glimpse of who they are and why they want to come into this job. And through that, we get a lot of information. And then those that we find are near the top of that oral board situation, the oral board is graded. Everybody's graded. We have to save all those grades, all the questions, all our notes. And those have to be saved for so many years after, and I believe it's 3 years. Once the oral board's over, we may pull somebody aside if we feel that they're going to be a good candidate. And we have them look over some paperwork and see if they want to sign a conditional offer. The conditional offer is just that we want to proceed with them in the hiring process and start the background investigation and all the other steps in order to hire them. If candidate A says, yes, after the oral board and the PT test, I would like to work here at Exeter, and they sign the conditional contract, there's also a waiver in there for release of information. And that's when we'll give them a packet, and I'm guessing it's 20 to 30 pages long, which they will take home, go through the packet and fill it out. And it's everything from where they've lived for the last 5 years, who they lived with, friends, relatives, significant others, financials. They'll come back, they'll sit with a detective who is assigned to their background investigation. They will go over that packet with them line by line to make sure that it's completely accurate. As you can imagine, in law enforcement, honesty and integrity is of the utmost. So this is the time where if they've made a mistake or they've omitted something from the packet, it's time to kind of right the ship and tell us. From then on out, after that has been amended, if it needs to be amended, if there's any discrepancies from then on out, they'll be essentially pushed out of the process. Will be deemed untruthful, and we cannot go on with the process. But that process with the background check is, we will look at their financials, relationships, personal life, work history, education. They'll end up getting a medical exam, a psychological exam, and eventually sit down for a polygraph. If the candidate passes all those items, they'll start a short FTO period with us until the police academy opens up. The police academy is a 16-week process. And then when they're completed that 16-week process with the New Hampshire Police Academy, they'll come back for another 12 weeks of training with us minimum. At the end of the 12 weeks, if we feel as though they're good to go on the street solo, then they will. If we feel as though they need more time, then we can extend that. And we've extended it to the point where we've had employees here almost a year. And like the chief said, if it's the right fit for them and the right job, and we feel it's going to help make the community safe and they're safe and our people safe, then they become a police officer with the town and they continue on with their career. If it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. So that, in a nutshell, is the hiring process for a police officer in Exeter. Does anybody have any questions?
Emily?
Yeah, I was just curious. What sort of questions get asked on the polygraphic exam that they take?
Those are some great questions, and I'm not the polygraph examiner, but it's typically, well, the chief will chime in.
Okay, Chief.
So that's very interesting because in New Hampshire, they do use polygraph for employment, right? Some of the other states surrounding us do not, Massachusetts, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So that you heard about the first packet for the detectives. There is another packet for your polygraph. And I want to say that's very, very extensive, if not hundreds of more questions, more in depth. And those questions dig really into everything. And when I mean everything, I mean your sexual history, your financial history, bankruptcy, late on credit cards, stealing, vandalism, hate crimes, you name it, it's in that packet. Now, from there, you don't get tested on all those questions. From there, there'll be a select group of questions that the polygrapher will ask. Those vary. They can vary with somebody. Maybe we're hiring someone that was a police officer somewhere else. They will get a different set of questions. Have you ever lied in a police report? Have you ever used excessive force? Have you ever covered up for another officer? Those type of questions will be geared towards a former police officer. Mm-hmm. But for a new one, they're going to be looking essentially for truthfulness. Most of the time, it's not what you put in those packets. It's that you lied about it.
Yeah.
And that is also what really jams up a lot of police officers. It's sometimes it's not what they did, but the fact that they lie about it afterwards and cover it up. And there's a saying that we have, it's if you lie, you die. And everyone is shaking their heads, absolutely, in law enforcement and a lot of the careers where your integrity is at stake and someone's freedom is at stake, especially in policing, you need to be truthful. So that's where that comes from. There's a lot of information in those packets, and then we caution people because it's very stressful. That's a very stressful exam, no matter who you are. So we caution them: don't do research on the internet, on polygraphs. Don't look up how to beat them or how to do anything, because that's going to come out too. And, we use some really good trained polygraphers that know what to look for.
Do they ask about past involvement with white supremacist organizations, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, not specifically white supremacists, but anything to do with prejudice, hatred, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Katie had a question.
To bounce off that question, if something comes up and the detective says, there might be an issue with something over here, they'll get with the polygrapher and say, ask a question about this. So if there's a question about, white supremacy or tied to a group, but the detective really can't find a definite link there, they can ask the polygrapher to dig more into that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Katie, you had a question as well?
Yeah, I wonder if there's a way without sort of weakening the efficacy of this process. I wonder if there's a way to sort of systematically make the community more aware of some of these processes. I think Emily's point is exactly right. I would love to know more examples of what's on the polygraph. And I think if the community in general knew at what point in the process is the social media looked at, who does that examining? Well, how do they do it? Because we've seen even as silly examples as, on reality TV, people dig through social media and it becomes kind of a firestorm. And I think people would love to know what kind of process goes behind looking at people's Facebook or whatever it is, what kind of questions are asked on the polygraph, just so that they might have a better groundwork for understanding, where are the disqualifying moments in the hiring process, just in the name of, transparency. I think a lot of people would be interested in that.
Sure. So the process to go through the social media, that's actually done with their consent and with the applicant there with the detective. There's no behind the scenes, going in deep into someone's social footprint. But what we're finding now is now in this day and age, you can actually watch an applicant grow up on their social media. It's amazing, right? I mean, you think about it, some of you or some of your kids maybe, or some relatives, you've seen them from little children on their social media, and they grow up and now they're, at the age where they're entering the workforce. So it's pretty amazing to see that and what that can reveal about a person too. Obviously, people ask, and you can go to the PSTC website, and they actually have a question and answer about becoming a police officer. So like people ask, hey, I did this when I was a teenager. Am I disqualified? Can I never be a police officer? And a lot of times the answer is no, you're not disqualified. And they don't know that, for PSTC, we'll say marijuana. You are not to have used marijuana within 12 months of being certified as a police officer. If you're under 18 and you use marijuana, that changes. So things you've done when you were a juvenile don't necessarily, you're not necessarily blocked out of being a police officer. If that's, we look at other things. So people make mistakes, people make bad decisions, but we look at the totality of those decisions, those mistakes. Do they own up to them? Does it, have they made repeated mistakes? That's different, right? Versus just one or two different things. So everything's different. We look at each person individually with their background. So, I think that's important for people to know too.
And Emily, I know you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that every department has different procedures. The departments here in New Hampshire, and then Exeter from that, and what our procedure here in New Hampshire is probably very different than, 20 miles down the road in Massachusetts. And I think part of this process is getting folks is establishing trust with the community that's policed. And I think maybe even like an article or something in the paper talking about this is what the process is. And it's not like we're just grabbing anyone off the street that wants to be a police officer, but we're looking back. We're doing essentially, a background investigation on each one of these officers, and those are options that we as a department don't have to take, but we have. I think that could make folks feel better if they do go through these polygraph tests,
and for us dispatchers as well.
Yeah,
we go through very rigorous background.
Yeah, I think just a lot of this is trust and showing that you really did more than maybe you have to do because that's the standard you want here. I think that could go a long way. I mean, I come from a family where people got security clearance investigations every few years, and it was like everything was open, financial records, everything, and, but that's something that their work required, and I'm glad it did. So, yeah. Just a thought.
Matt?
Just to cap off what Emily's saying there, it's not that they're doing more than what's required. This is what's required. I mean, this is the gold standard of hiring in law enforcement from local towns, bigger municipalities, and the federal government, just as you described with family members. This is the standard. I don't know anybody who's hiring just on a phone call and a resume. But correct me if I'm wrong, Chief.
Well, I think as good as I do, there's a standard, and then there's people doing what they're supposed to be doing on a background check. So we don't just check the references. Okay, so think about that. So when you put your references down, you're going to put people that like you, people that are friendly with you. We want the people that aren't listed as references. We want to talk to those people. What are they going to say about you? So we do go further. In fact, only recently has New Hampshire required a psychological exam. We've always done that. We've always saw the importance in doing that. So to your point, there's, what you have to check off the boxes for PSTC, but then there's actually doing the legwork, actually going back, having somebody drive 2 states over to knock on some doors where they grew up, go into their house unannounced to see how they're living. We do those things. I can't say every agency does.
Chief, I had a quick question, and it was as a result of reading a lot of the literature that you sent us, that some of the challenges of policing today, it's a different tack than what we're on right now, is the standards are what you need are more people with interpersonal skills, more like you said earlier, the social service aspect of it, rather than somebody who can, be strong and forceful physically. They're looking for, community policing and that whole thing. That's the challenge. Those are sort of, I'll say, for lack of a better term, touchy-feely characteristics and qualities you need in the people. So that's got to be a challenge to find those people. That's sort of prong one of my question. And then the second is also the opposite of what we just talked about. They talk about the challenge in this of the process of application being so long that then you do sometimes lose good people. The lieutenant already mentioned from November to March, which totally we understand that it has to be thorough, but then just like anything else, you could lose a really good prospect. So the one question would be, can we tighten that piece up, but then also, or is there any way to make that shorter to help keep the people interested? But then also you're going after skills that really are completely different than they used to be, the new police forces of 2021.
Absolutely. And, nothing is more frustrating than having a great person sitting in front of you that wants to be a police officer, that wants to do it for all the right reasons, to help people, to make a difference, and they tell you they can't pass the run or do the push-ups. That's because, does that make a good police officer? Someone that can pass a PT test versus someone that has common sense, the ability to make critical, decisions on the fly and make good ones, and, build community rapport. Maybe someone's volunteered their whole life, but they can't pass a PT test. So that's what we're stuck with. Recently, we have a really good applicant. He's in the U.S. military. He lives in town, but he's not a U.S. citizen. But he's in our military. He's serving in our military. He's actually gone overseas right now, but we're waiting on him to try and get his citizenship, because right now the law is in New Hampshire for the police academy, you need to be a U.S. citizen. So he's the best applicant we have and really wants to do this job. I think it's crazy that he can serve in our military, but he can't be a New Hampshire police officer. So we're working on that. He's just got his permanent resident status. So we're hoping that the military is going to help streamline him, get his citizenship, and then we'll go from there. But we have 2 openings right now for police. We have that PT test coming up. So if you folks know anybody, relatives, friends, anybody, there's some clergy members here, you can reach out that way, involved with the school, things like that. I mean, that's really how we're going to get our good folks, is by word of mouth and by in that fashion.
I mute Matt and then Katie.
So, Chief, as you stated, if he's a green card resident alien, before he leaves the military is the simplest possibility for him to get his naturalization. And that's not unique to the military. That happens all the time. So if he's finishing up on his military contract, he should have access to that through a counselor. Citizenship Immigration Services does this all the time. So it does seem like a hurdle, but it really isn't a hurdle because he'd have to finish his military service with honorable discharge before they give him his naturalization. But it will happen as long as he's honorably discharged. So it sounds like a big hurdle, but it shouldn't be. You may even be able to call Citizenship Immigration Services in Manchester to make sure that application, is processed in a timely fashion. I don't know when his ETS date is for the military, but it happens all the time. So.
Right. So we were prepared to hire him months ago, and then we couldn't. I did draft a nice letter for him, that he could use, but now he's deployed overseas. So hopefully when he comes back, we can step back up and start working on that. But that was a big hurdle for him. We were going to hire him. We did a background on him, hoping that it was going to come through quicker, and it never did.
Can you hire somebody part-time that's a green card resident alien?
Cannot be a New Hampshire police officer that is not a U.S. citizen.
Thank you, Matt. Katie, I know you had a question.
Yeah, so it seems like in reading some of the literature that you sent over, this really dovetails with a lot of what we were talking about last week in terms of the increased variety of responsibilities that are asking police officers to do. I mean, I guess there's a couple of facets to my question. One is, does every police officer have to be equally skilled at each part of the job? Obviously, there's going to be some amount of training that you're going to want everyone to be able to do. In the event of a crisis, you can call all hands on deck and everybody knows the procedures for emergencies, things like that. But I wonder if specialization within departments, even though, obviously the size of the department would have a big impact on whether this would work, would help with hiring if there were people who are more interested in the community outreach, working with the homeless, working with addiction. If specialized units or increasingly specialized units would be helpful. But I also just want to know what your thoughts are, Chief, on it. Is this headed nationally? Is this headed in a direction where it's just not possible for police departments to manage all this huge range of services, and we should be having conversations about how to offload some of these responsibilities to other groups? Presumably that would also help with hiring in a longer term way. I mean, do you think that that's where this is going?
I do. I think it's gone to a point where some agencies are reducing their standards just to get bodies to patrol areas. I don't think it definitely hasn't happened in this area, but we see it happening in New York City, LA, these bigger areas. They're reducing standards, and that's the worst thing you can do for this profession. You're going to get more awful things that we're going to see when you do those things. I would agree that there does need to be a scaling back in what people, I say you, but legislators really, government tells the police what they want them to enforce and what they don't, right? They make the laws. So scale it back. Absolutely would agree with that. Policing at first was just to enforce the laws, and then it became, social worker type things, all these different things. So it is tough to talk about having an officer that's really good at all of them. That's rare. You have officers that really enjoy different aspects of the job, and that's great. You find their strengths and you hone those. We have some officers that really love detective work, and then doing the real methodical look back into reports and cases and interviewing people. And then you have other officers that like the tactical part of things, or other officers that really like engaging with the youth, the kids. So they'll go into the schools, they'll walk around during lunch, or they'll get into the dare, or they'll go visit the SRO. We have one SRO at the high school, but we have multiple officers that go in there and chat with her and chat with the kids. So they have different areas that they're interested in. A lot of things we see on a new hire is, I also teach at a local college. So I'll get my students that say they want to be a detective. And I'm like, well, that's nice. You can be a detective someday, but you don't start at a detective. You always start at a patrol level, and then you work yourself up. So some kids just don't know that. They think they want to go right into being a detective.
Emily?
So a question I have, I know with security clearances for the government or the military, they check them every 5 to 10 years, and they do sort of a review. When someone comes on as a police officer, are there periodic reviews? Are there polygraphs at 10 years or 5 years? Is there some sort of check to see, like, is this person still a good fit for what we're doing? So investigative, not just performance reviews, but investigation.
Those are good questions. For us, we're small enough that we're very close knit with everyone. And me and my staff, we really know our employees. So the short answer to that is no, we don't re-polygraph after they're hired unless they're being investigated for something and maybe untruthful. So we'll polygraph for that as part of an internal investigation. But as far as looking back and making sure that they're still the person we hired, we know from our interactions with them, and that's how we handle it here. I can see the importance for that in a larger agency where they don't have that kind of real close-knit relationship, but we don't do that here. And I don't want to forget that we also have dispatcher Supervisor Shoup that's going to talk about her dispatchers still.
Right. And what we can do, I think these are a lot of good questions, and I'm sure the committee has even more, and we may even, have more of this on our next agenda as well. But why don't we at least talk, let's have Supervisor Shoup chat with us, tell us what's going on in her world. And then that may give us some more to discuss in this meeting, and then maybe for sure in a follow-up meeting, because I know I have more questions. So certainly take it away, Supervisor Shoup. Tell us all about dispatch.
So dispatch, it works quite similar to the police, where we have a pretty standard process that we go through. Our last cycle for dispatchers, we actually had 32 applicants. Of those, the first step of our process is to send out a questionnaire or kind of like a survey to let them know what dispatch is. We have the unique problem of that when people apply for our job, they don't really know what they're getting into. Whereas you apply for a police officer, you have a pretty strong idea of what you're applying for. For dispatch, we get a lot of people from all scopes of experience who apply and have no clue what our job is. So a big portion actually read our questionnaire and survey about what we're expecting, what the job will be like, and we lose a number of them there. Out of 32 last time, we lost 21 people after that survey was sent out. We had 2 in that field that had already had dispatching experience, one who made it to the next phase of the process, which for them was our oral board. If you don't have experience in dispatch, you take it's a standardized test. It's an audio test given by an independent company where they come in, they sit down, it takes like an hour and a half, and it just tests their basic skill level for all the aspects of dispatching. So anything from how to read maps to critical thinking, multitasking, decision-making is a big one. And it measures people on their any ability to do those things and scores them accordingly. So if they pass with an 80 or above, they move on to the oral board. And Last time we actually had 9 people go through to that test phase. 3 did not pass, the other 6 did. So they all moved on to the oral board along with the 2 with experience. The oral board is because we are combined with fire. We sit with Deputy Chief Monk, myself, and Assistant Chief Paisan from the fire department. It's a standardized 15 questions. We kind of delve into their background, how they make decisions, because judgment in dispatching is huge. We are the ones who decide what calls go out first. We prioritize, how we're going to give those calls out, how we word it. All of that affects a call's outcome and how officers respond. So knowing how a candidate makes those decisions and thinks critically is intensely important. So that's where we kind of get to know them and how they think. From there, we take whatever candidate that we feel is the best fit. We do the conditional offer, just like Lieutenant Bolduc went over. And the background check is very similar. We don't necessarily do a polygraph for dispatchers, but it is an option. They do go through a physical exam for hearing, sight, all those kinds of things to make sure that they can handle that part of the job. And then our training process itself is an 8 to 10 week on the job training with one-on-one. They rotate through a couple different trainers. At the end of that 8 to 10 weeks, they're released on their own and are on probation for the remainder of their year here. So it is a pretty in-depth process. Just in the last hiring cycle, we had to go through it 3 separate times. We have a lot of people who withdraw for either the questionnaire or the pay, unfortunately. We are on the low end of hiring, so all the agencies around us, they see that they can make that much more money next door. They're going to go next door. And that's just a fact we have to deal with. But I do think it's important to include dispatch in this conversation because of the way we affect how calls go and the decision-making process behind what we do.
So, my question right off the bat would be, how do you recruit for dispatchers in some way? In the same way I was going to ask the lieutenant, and you can respond to this next time, about going into the colleges, universities, or just wherever, job fairs. But there'd be distinct characteristics and qualifications you'd be looking for in a dispatcher, I would guess. And how do you find that? How do you recruit for that?
It would be a lot easier if there were something like the police academy for dispatch, but unfortunately, we don't have anything like that. We do have people who come in with a communication degree, but it's not tailored to what we do. So unfortunately, we don't have that opportunity. So, that when we have an opening, it's posted just like patrol is in the New Hampshire Municipal Association, the town website, Indeed, that kind of thing. We reach out. There's some people who apply to be patrol if they're flagged a little bit to be better suited to dispatch, then we can kind of, they get sent to me as well as Lieutenant Bolduc. And that's a conversation we have, but unfortunately, there's not really a standard place we can go to recruit people who are looking to do this position.
I know we're at 4:00 and I hate to ask these questions, but just something for a later topic. So for Chief and also for Jessica, these are questions related to your cycle time. What's the total recruitment time from the time you post to you get the person in the door? What's the recruitment time or cycle time from interview, offer, and they accept and they can start? How long does it take for the background process to occur? To the your retention rate. What is your retention? And of those that do separate, do you know why they separate? And are they going on to something different? And or are you recruiting and attracting, as an example, those that may have come from other service agencies beyond the military, but may be in other parts of the government that come in? And then for dispatchers, have you looked at partnering with, as an example, Al's Automotive or a company like that, where they're responding to accidents and other things, they have a dispatcher there. Not to say you're trying to recruit them, but other companies like that. So that's all. Multitude of questions. Maybe not enough time for this call, but maybe for later.
All right, I'll go first. So typically, because we have so many tests we have to schedule for in the background investigation, we want to take our time with that. You're looking at least several months for that to happen, from the PT test to the actual swearing in, at least several months. If it's a local person with a lot of roots here, that can go a little quicker. And then after that, trying to think of what some of the other questions were.
It has to do with cycle time, like, how long does it take from the time you identify a candidate, okay. So, and are they aware of how long that process is, so that, the level set your expectations so that you don't lose them out of interest, or they get frustrated and they go to another department or another town, so.
Right. Yeah. So we're up against time with making sure we do a good, thorough background investigation, making sure we're able to schedule all the different testing with the different professionals. And we're also up against the academy, 3 times a year, seeing when's the next academy start date. There's a lot of paperwork that has to be submitted in a time deadline for the academy. So are we going to be able to meet that deadline? If not, then we're gonna FTO them for maybe 3 months before they go to academy, and that's not always feasible, because we want them to go to the academy first, get the basics of policing, and then come to our FTO. But we were in that crunch where we get an applicant that's really good, and they tell us they've got a conditional with 2 other agencies. So you're kind of competing. You're definitely competing. So, you want to get them in, and you want to give them some FTO time before the academy. That happens too. And we'll have people that are going through our conditional that leave to go somewhere else because maybe they're quicker, or they find out they pay more, or something like that. As far as the turnover rate goes, we recently, within the last five or so years, we're almost like a training ground for the New Hampshire State Police. A lot of them go on to be a trooper, and obviously for good reasons. There's a lot more that they can be exposed to. There's more, specialties. There's canine. There's drug interdiction. There's major crimes. There's just a lot more opportunities at the state police level. So they're never faulted for going there. We have great relationships with them still. We've got that connection with Exeter, and then retirements. So what we're seeing in this profession is that people that can retire are getting out right now. They're not waiting. I just saw a recent poll of 10,000 police officers across the country. How many of you would recommend this job to someone you knew? And 7% said they would. So that speaks volumes to how the officers feel right now that are working this job. And what we're going to see, you're going to see mass retirements, and then you're going to see a low applicant pool, and people are going to be faced with, delayed response times. They're going to be faced with not being able to fill shifts. Maybe the officers that are working are going to get burnt out with overtime shifts, things like that. We do have some officers on this call that, feel free to ask them different questions about how they feel. Why did they start policing? Or, would they recommend this job to a friend right now? It'd be interesting to see their perspectives as well.
That's what I wanted to speak to. I know we're sort of going over time, but even for a few minutes, especially the younger ones, because again, in reading that whole report, the three things you just noticed is that there's fewer applicants, there's a retirement bubble, and the resignations where they're resigning earlier than they might normally be. So for any one of you that's only been at the force 10 years or less, I would be very interested to know what attracted you to it and hopefully what's keeping you in it. Anyone who wants to respond, I'm welcome to hear.
Sure, I'll say a few things. I think most of the guys and girls that we work with would say that it's just kind of something that you've always wanted to do. for some unknown reason. And I think that it's the connection with the community. It's that want to help other people and, to be an impact in a positive way on your community. Necessarily would you recommend this job to somebody else? Absolutely. I love coming to work every single day. There are struggles that we face, but I think that it just takes a certain person to do this job. And, and that goes for dispatch too. And I think like Lieutenant Bolduc and Supervisor Shoup said, we're searching for that right person. And that's why we have such a thorough background, because it does take a certain person to do this. And you have to be multifaceted in terms of good character, but also having the skill set to perform.
And do you feel, anyone can answer this as well, is there the mentorship there? Is there role models, et cetera, for you that keep you going even on the days when you wonder, why did I do this? Or I'm sure there's up days and down days, and you feel you have that kind of mentorship going on? Again, anyone?
It's unique where we're a big kind of team together. We, and especially in recent years, I know we've leaned on each other a lot. It's a very supportive environment, I feel like, because we kind of handle things together. So that mentorship, the interpersonal skills we have here, we're very fortunate with the group we have that, we've come together a lot. And in recent years, it's only solidified.
Any of the other officers want to speak to the question? Any of the questions?
Yeah, I can share my story, I guess. So I went to college after high school. And at freshman year, I was undecided. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I went to St. Anselm College, and that school has a good criminal justice program. So I started taking courses there, and I enjoyed it. And as I thought more about it, I thought, hey, this is something that I might be good at. And I continued with that. And I'm happy and, proud of my career so far. I've 8 years on, and I still enjoy it. I know a lot of people still see the career as challenging and maybe not worth getting into. I'm the first officer in law enforcement in my family. I have 2 brothers and a sister that completely do completely different things, fine art and business. So I didn't grow up in a family where I had, uncles or, a father in law enforcement, but it's something that I think people always look at as interesting, and it is, fulfilling to help and serve a community. And this town is a good town to work for. But it is definitely difficult to get people interested in applying for a job that has a lot of difficulties and underpaid. And it's our job to find applicants that, want to do the job, because we might get people that apply, but they're not the best fit for it. So you got to choose, how do you figure out the person that is best for it? But, something that we work for and work towards. And I still, I'm happy with what I do.
No, that's encouraging. That's encouraging. I think the next time we meet, I think the committee, one of the things we've tried to talk about inclusion and all that on top of all of this is it's hard enough in a regular, just a candidate pool in general. You're looking for people. Then you add on top of it that you'd like it to be more diverse. So they talk about in the study, lack of women, lack of minorities, lack of bilingual officers. Just as a general statement, this study talks about that, or the report talks about how hard it is to get that, on top of the fact what we're dealing with, which is, can we get some qualified candidates just in general? I mean, not even getting the specifics of that type of and just a different demographic than what you're in. We just want to get qualified people. So that's a whole other aspect of this for all of police work in general. Well, this is great. I think this has been a great conversation for us to have. We're only on the tip of the iceberg, I am sure, but we can definitely regroup on some of this in our next meeting, which I just wanted to ask the committee as I started the meeting earlier. First, I want to thank everyone. No one to jump off yet, I hope, if you can hang into the end, of the stakeholder, of the staff folks, I mean. Do you want to meet on March 9th? Does it make sense? Do people have conflicts, et cetera? I just felt that it might be easier if we did not, but I don't want to make that decision unilaterally. Let's put it that way. I want to throw it up in the committee. If March 9th is still a good day for folks, we will do it. I know we have some conflicts already, but should we wait for the 23rd, or do we have enough that would meet on the 9th? Yes, Darius.
There's enough to meet on the 9th. We may not be able to vote for those that can attend, but at the same token, if we don't have a quorum and we need something to vote on, then we probably shouldn't meet.
All right.
So,
Katie?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot more to this conversation that we could get to on the 9th, just in terms of discussion and maybe brainstorming some ideas. So, and we won't be ready to process the results of the survey yet.
Right.
I would recommend that we meet for a further conversation on this topic, if possible. And also, I just wanted to say, I think it's a good idea to extend the survey a couple of days to give us election day to get more results. I don't see a downside to that. And probably we're going to have to figure out how we are going to share the data amongst ourselves before we come up with a plan for how to reach back out to those who want to be followed up with.
Exactly. So I agree with both of you and with Darius. I mean, both of you. We'll get this on the agenda, as well as one of the agenda items will be let's talk about how we want to work on the data that we get back. And hopefully if all of you that are on this, the dispatcher, Supervisor Shoup, and the rest of you, if you can come back on the 9th, we'd greatly appreciate it if the chief can come back, so we can continue this discussion. Because as I said, I think we have a lot to take in and talk about, because this is the future of the policing, is right here. It's all about recruitment, retention, training. That's the key to all of this. So I think we have a lot more to say about it. So on that note,
one other quick thing before we make a motion. Emily, is there something you wanted to say?
No.
Okay.
Did I miss anything? I did not have any correspondence. I will make another quick teaser for our next meeting. I will talk about a little bit about, I was informally reached out to by the facilities committee. This is more related to brick and mortar, so to speak, the warrant article about the study, et cetera. So they just were curious as stakeholders. This is way down the list, goal 5. Actually, we start talking about infrastructure and physical plant, so to speak. So it's a bit down the road and not the immediate focus of this group, but they had just reached out if we were interested in talking about that aspect of, the physical plant of police and fire buildings, et cetera. So it was all very informal, but I thought I would mention it. We can talk about that at the next meeting as well. Just, again, it's a little down the road, but they reached out to me. So I wanted to make sure I shared that with everyone, that they were welcome to have if we had any input on that through the chief, they were opening that up to us. So again, that's for future discussion. So on that note, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and I will call the roll. Matt Carboni.
Aye.
Katie Adams.
Aye.
Emily Heath.
Aye.
Alexis Simpson.
Aye.
Darius Thompson.
Aye.
And the chair says aye.